Good afternoon. I'm Chandra Subramaniam, Dean of the David Nazarian College of Business and Economics. It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you to the Eunice and Soraya Nazarian Center for Performing Arts for what I am certain will be a fascinating and thought-provoking program on artificial intelligence and the workforce of the future. Thank you all so much for joining us. I would also like to personally thank Provost Meera Komarraju for her support and for joining us this evening. I'm grateful to the faculty, my fellow deans, and the members of the cabinet for their collegiality and for their interest in this program, one that touches so many of the academic disciplines and programs across the CSUN campus. In a few minutes, Provost Komarraju will offer a few remarks and introduce Jesús Mantas, our keynote speaker, who will set the stage for the panel discussion. To save time in the introductions, we have distributed printed programs to all of you with full bios for all of those remarkable people with QR codes that link to their LinkedIn profiles. Utpal Mangla appears in your program as a panelist, but urgent business has him traveling to India tonight. So Jesús has graciously agreed to join the panel. Utpal has visited our campus, as many of you may know, about 9 times over the past 8 years, and also serves on the Nazarian College Advisory Board. We are deeply grateful for Jesús to step in. For the panel session, Jesús will be joined on stage by Karina Montilla Edmonds, Senior VP and Global Head of Academies and University Alliances for SAP. Karina will discuss the challenges of talent acquisition and perpetual upskilling, with special emphasis on the disruptive force of AI, not only for the high-tech global workforce of SAP, but for the countless companies and governments who deploy her firm's enterprise solutions. Next, Cameron Kinloch, CFO of Weights and Biases. Cameron will discuss her firm's integral part in the AI development industry's ecosystem, providing sophisticated tools to facilitate data training, testing, and prototyping of the powerful applications that will redefine commerce and careers for all of us. Next, Stephen Cheung, President of the LAEDC, or the Economic Development Corporation, and the LA World Trade Center. Stephen will provide data, insights, and anecdotes regarding the role of AI is playing in advancing and revolutionizing major industries in Southern California, including, and most importantly, with preparations for the LA 28 Summer Olympics. I'm excited to hear what he's got to say. Stephen also serves on the Nazarian College Advisory Board. As part of the programs all of you hold, you should have received a card for questions you might consider. The ushers will collect these cards throughout the evening and convey them to the stage. We have found this to be the most efficient approach to Q&A for an event such as this. Just to give you some background, this is the third in what we had hoped would be an annual symposia devoted to the workforce of the future. A global pandemic, all of you remember, interrupted that, but we are now restoring the series in our program this evening. In 2018, we explored the ways in which KPMG and IBM Watson were revolutionizing the practice of accounting. In 2019, executives from IBM, Grace Note Nielsen, and PwC had a lively conversation regarding the ways in which data analytics and blockchains were fundamentally altering the economics of the entertainment industry in real time. With IBM and others having made some huge strides in the ensuing years, what seemed like a distant horizon then is now upon us, with new disruption certain to follow. Every technological disruption has occasioned what some have suggested is a new central tenet of capitalism: creative destruction. These disruptions inevitably destroy industries, companies, and careers, but more new opportunities arise to take their place. It can be painful to get caught in the downdraft, but exhilarating to catch the new whirlwind. What has changed in the first quarter of this century is the rapidity and short cycles of these disruptions. It's hard to keep up, but it's our duty. In discharging it, we are determined to instill in our multicultural student body the values of intellectual curiosity, courage, and commitment to lifelong learning. It is, by the way, the only path to CSUN's mission of durable social mobility. These symposiums play an important role with direct consequence for our efforts. In 2018-19, we articulated in this same arena a strategy of data first, making changes to curriculum, realigning our academic department structure, and hiring new faculty with expertise to create an undergraduate and a graduate degree programs in business analytics. Throughout 2019 to 2023, we have expanded beyond our existing corporate and institutional alliances through third-party content, which is now integrated into the curriculum, with students earning highly marketable certificates from well-respected and copyrighted holders: IBM, SAP, Microsoft, Google, Bloomberg, IRS, HubSpot, Hootsuite, among others. In 22-23, we announced a new initiative, Professional Education Beyond a Degree, to ensure that all business students would graduate with the skills to be job-ready on day one. After concerted effort to identify certain LinkedIn learning certificates beyond the ones I mentioned that complemented our curriculum, students were encouraged to add these micro-credentials to their respective syllabi. That in 22-23 academic year, students earned more than 1,800 third-party certificates. Cumulatively, in the last 3 years, that number has now risen to more than 5,000. In 23-24, with the generous support of JP Morgan Chase Foundation, we created, in addition, another 9 co-curricular boot camps run on Saturdays, with instructional programming designed and delivered by tenure-track faculty, and with Coursera micro-credentialing certificates from IBM and Google at their core. More than 500 students from across our sister colleges at CSUN took part, from geophysics to fashion merchandising, electrical engineering to journalism, literature to global supply chain management, earned certificates in data collection, relational databases, Python, SQL, cybersecurity, cloud computing, AI, and machine learning. As I speak to you today, new programs are in the works to prepare our students for the skills they will need for what Ethan Malik at University of Penn has termed core intelligence, human-AI collaboration in the form of AI agents, personalized for the individual work style and specific jobs. All along this journey, our faculty has begun to explore the power of AI to power their research with automated data collection and analysis, initial scans and summaries of the literature, technologies that can form innovative and novel hypotheses or explore previously overlooked research directions to accelerate discovery. Beyond the classroom, AI has proved incredibly valuable for our current Nazarian College strategic planning process. This spring, we sent a lengthy survey of open-ended questions to some 5,000 students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community leaders. We process the rich, voluminous, and unstructured data gathered through an AI engine that summarized major themes, ranked concerns, and recommendations by prevalence, and summarized contrarian points of view. These outputs were used to drive focus groups and tabletop discussions at our annual faculty staff retreat. This AI-enabled approach not only accelerated the process, but I think it also made the process possible. Lastly, IBM has been an incredible partner in this enterprise. We will never be able to sufficiently thank Steve Canepa and Utpat Mangla, who was our first IBM members who came here, and other IBM global executives who have served and currently serve on the Nazarian College Advisory Board. They have established foundation that prove durable enough to rebuild after a 4-year hiatus, with their esteemed colleague, Jesús Mantas, on our stage this evening. And so, with that, I want to thank all of you for attending. And please allow me to invite to the stage Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost, Dr. Komarraju, to introduce Jesús Mantas. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for making time this evening to join us for what promises to be a very inspiring and informative talk and panel discussion. On behalf of the entire campus, I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Jesús Mantas from IBM, who is our keynote speaker this evening. It is indeed our honor to host Mr. Mantas, a highly respected and globally known corporate executive and board member and director who is especially focused and committed to the social mobility, professional development, and investment in the entrepreneurial culture of the Hispanic Plus community. Mr. Mantas' thought-provoking and inspirational writings are nationally and globally acclaimed, and his thought leadership and engagement with international corporations, academic institutions, governments, think tanks, and NGOs around the world have a profound impact and influence. Mr. Mantas is a global thinker who pays very close attention to demographic trends. He's well attuned to the divergent demographic trends of the global north and global south that will drive talent challenges for the duration of the entire 21st century. While our students live, study, and work in one of the most vibrant local economies in the United States, they will be competing in a global market, especially as emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence level the playing field. Now, as a Hispanic and minority-serving institution, Cal State Northridge is uniquely positioned to address these challenges and to prepare our students for success in this exciting world that dares us to be innovative. By making emerging technologies such as AI accessible to underserved communities of color, and by emphasizing the utility of these technologies, we can deliver on our promises to them. Due to its AACSB accreditation, the Nazarian College of Business and Economics ranks among the top 5% of business schools, with over 6,700 students pursuing degrees in major fields of study and 400 additional minors. We can well imagine how well the college is positioned to move the needle in preparing the workforce of the future. In doing so, we can also help scale up social mobility, a goal for which our campus has already moved into the top 10 universities in the nation. The advantage of being agile and forward-thinking is that we can proactively prepare our faculty and students to leverage what the human-AI collaboration can offer. AI-related technologies are challenging higher education to be innovative. With sufficient resources, our faculty can explore the possibility of creating AI-assisted multimedia content, adopting AI-enhanced textbooks and learning materials, enhancing student engagement by incorporating real-time analysis of classroom experiences, and offering AI-assisted tutoring outside the classroom. AI-related technologies are challenging us to refresh our curriculum. For example, by incorporating AI-assisted student presentations, we can ensure that our students develop AI-related skills as they graduate and enter the employment market or pursue graduate school. Additionally, if we can prepare our students to be contributors to technology, not just consumers, we would be fostering inclusion and equity in education. Now, in conclusion, I request our faculty, staff, and students who are here this evening to pay keen attention to Mr. Mantas' keynote address, as well as the distinguished panel that will follow. And then, to reflect on how we can leverage AI for better student outcomes. Whether we are ready or not, AI will force our students to compete in a global talent and career market. It is critical for us to help our students develop a global mindset, encouraging our students to look beyond Southern California and seize global opportunities would help diversify the global workforce. We look forward to Mr. Mantas' thoughts about the strategic and global view of where AI is going and how it is already impacting every industry and every society on Earth. Thank you, Jesús. We truly appreciate your time and the effort you have made to visit our campus for this important event. So, audience, please join me in offering Jesús Mantas a warm and enthusiastic CSUN welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for not having anything better to do today afternoon. Thank you to everybody for making sure that you get extra credit for being here. I was terrified when I was asked to do this. And the reason why I was terrified is I said, my goodness, this is exactly what the world needs, yet another AI presentation. So I was trying to figure out how do I make this a little bit different? How do I leave you at least something that you can use that is pragmatic, or at least how do I make it a little bit more entertaining? So what I'm going to try to do today is give you a bit of a perspective, a different perspective that you may have gotten on what AI is and what is not. Why does it matter in a different way than probably other technologies than in the past? In the context of commercial impact and business impact, I'm going to try to give you some specific examples on how companies not only are using it to create what I call the magic trick, or to compose the poem, or to wow people, but how companies are actually using it to deliver a specific productivity at scale, and we'll give you some examples. And then I want to talk a little bit about the risks, the regulation, and why does it matter. And with that, what I will do is leave plenty of time for the panel so we can have a great dialogue. Make sense? Worth your afternoon? We'll see, we'll see. So first, a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in the south of Spain, studied engineering longer than I can remember now in Madrid, and I was always fascinated with biology. So I actually happened to do my thesis. I started working with what we used to call neural networks in 1989. My thesis was neural networks applied to speech recognition in 1993, which is almost like 3 decades ago. And I wanted to start there because in most venues these days, like last night, I was going to a restaurant for dinner and the waiter was telling me about AI. It seems like everybody that watches a YouTube video becomes a self-appointed AI expert and tells all of us what the latest prompt is or how to figure out a better recipe on ChatGPT. So the perspective that I'm gonna give you is actually a bigger journey of having gone through like highs and lows through the use and the experience of this technology. But I'm even gonna get you further back. I'm actually gonna get you to the origins of computing itself. And it really started with this idea. It was a philosophy by Leibniz, which basically, he said everything in the world could be represented as nothing or everything. It was a very philosophical, very complicated thought. Very few people understood what that meant. But that was the beginning of create the idea that everything around us could be represented in a binary form. Then you fast forward to now, last century, and it was Claude Shannon who, inspired by this concept of representing binary, he basically spent over 10 years obsessed with the idea of what is actual information and how do you represent information. And he created this theory that information is basically the inverse of probability, meaning the less likely something happens, the more information it has. The more frequent something happens, the less information we have. This seems kind of like not easy to understand, but it's the only reason why we all can enjoy streaming movies today. Because it was the beginning of understanding how you could compress information, how you could encode in binary forms information, how you could take reality with all of its complexity and transform it into a representation of data that could be transacted with. So therefore, these two simple ideas, the theory of information and the world of binary, started to develop the representation of everything around us. And that was the beginning of computing as we know it. That, together with the transistor then became an electronic form that could represent a binary state. And you could put many of these transistors, and that could actually represent information as we know it today. And once you have it in transistors, you can store it, you can query it, you can manipulate it, you can add it, you can compute with it. And we have been, for the last 40 years, driving a curve that is known as Moore's Law, of advancing those two ideas and improving how much information we can put into a computer. And as you can see, that created computing as we know it, then it created the age of PCs, then it created the age of mobility and data centers, and now we got it to the age of AI. But here's what's different. What's different is AI is actually not about probability of information and binary. AI is inspired on a different paradigm. This is Santiago Ramón y Cajal. He's another Spaniard. He won Nobel Prize for a very simple discovery. He figured that in the human brain, before Santiago Ramón y Cajal, it was understood, or it was expected, that the brain had these things called neurons that were hard connected ones with others. And what Santiago Ramón y Cajal discovered is these neurons are actually not hard connected. They have something in between called the synapse. And that is the way in which the brain encodes information. So one neuron can transmit information to another neuron depending on a chemical reaction in that synapse. So that inspired what was the beginning of artificial intelligence. So in the 40s, there was this mathematical idea of, well, if the brain encodes information by having neurons and other neurons and being connected in the weights, in the connections that they have, is how information is being stored, how could we do that mathematically? And it was this idea of saying, well, maybe we can have these models, and each of these neurons, they look something like this, is you have many inputs, and these neurons are going to take all of these inputs, which are these parameters, and based on a formula, it will decide what the output is. So you could have many inputs, it decides an output, and this would be the equivalent of one neuron. And that was what created the modern day, what we call deep learning. So it was born in 1956 in in Dartmouth. It was the first time that the actual term artificial intelligence was coded. And the idea was, could we, on one side mathematically, instead of just model information as transactions, could we model information as the weights of these neurons interconnecting with each other? That's what began the race that you'll remember in 1997, expert systems started to defy what up until that point we consider it was only a human privilege to play chess. In 2011, it started to show what was possible when you actually use text to encode in a neural network. And Watson won a Jeopardy contest with the two best humans that had ever played. But all of that had a really dark secret that nobody was talking about. In order to train, to actually have these artificial intelligence systems, these neural networks, in order to train them to do these things, this system has an insatiable need for data. And that data had to be labeled. In other words, if we want to teach a computer to read an image and determine if there is a cat on it, so you give an image that has a cat, and you tell the computer it has a cat on it, and then the computer learns it's a cat, and you do that 100 times, and then you do it with dogs, and you say it doesn't have a cat, so then when you present a picture, the computer says, oh, it has a cat, or it doesn't have a cat. But in order to do that, there were thousands of people that had to look at every one of these images, and they actually had to label by hand. Very expensive, unreliable, really not something that any of us could do in order to create an artificial intelligence system that would help us in any way. This is when another really good idea came up in the last 10 years. And it was this idea of, okay, so up until now, we have gone to understand how the brain encodes information, create computers that simulate that. Because of all of these transistors that we're having, all this power is actually growing the amount of information, but the constraint is it's very expensive and we don't have enough people to label all of this information. So what if we could build a system that would not require people to actually label the training data? So what you have heard about generative AI, foundation models, started with this really simple idea, which is, could we actually figure out a way that a computer will learn by itself how language works? Let's say how the English language works. So here's how we did it. It was a breakthrough, but now once you know it, it becomes very simple, right? So what Computer scientists this if they had 100 billion sentences. So 100 billion sentences of text. They feed it into this architecture, which is a language model, and then they play fill the blank with the computer. So you start basically, you take a sentence, you randomly take a word, and you tell the computer, just guess the word that is. And it guesses a lot of wrong words, and you keep saying wrong word, wrong word, wrong word. When it's the right word, you say right word. And when that is the right word, which you obviously know because you have 100 billion sentences, then the computer learns and adjusts automatically its parameters without any human having to do that. And then you do it again. Don't step over spilled milk, or turn, or sleep, or get. No, it's don't cry over spilled milk. And then the computer goes and then adjusts its parameters. And it does it again, and it does it again, and it does it again, trillions and trillions and trillions of times. And the result of that is something that we call a foundation model. It's a computer that by itself learns English language. And now you probably can appreciate, why does it take so much power? Why does it take so much electricity to train these models? Because it doesn't actually take the humans. It is basically simulating evolution through trial and error of 100 billion sentences, and the computer learns the relations of all of those sentences. So these foundation models, the interesting thing is they have evolved in the last 10 years so that once you have one of these building blocks, foundation model that understands the language, it takes just a little bit of tweaking for it to learn new things. So that's why when any of us go to ChatGPT or to others, then you basically go in and you say, wow, it can actually not only know English, but it can translate to any other language. It can actually compose new things because it really learned the essence of what that is. And that is what the big deal is. Is in the last 10 years, and the reason why AI is changing so much of what is changing is because it went from a specific tool that had to be trained for a specific task and only useful for a specific task. And then you do it again, and you do it again. And to train that, you needed a lot of people labeling a lot of data, and it was very expensive and very tedious, to now this thing that is called foundation model that minute zero, it already knows the language. It already knows 80 languages. It already can do all of the basics of language translation, and you just have to teach it a little bit, and it can do incredible things. So it democratizes the access of AI and to be applied to everything. Now, everything I've said right now, I've talked about language. And it so happens that when you look around, language is not the only language that we actually deal with. When we code on a computer, that is actually a language that the computer can learn exactly in the same way that we just talked about English. The language of chemistry is a language that the computer can learn. A geospatial map is a language that the computer can learn. And all of this is what has given the explosion of generative AI that today is being used to pretty much change everything that we do today. Here's an example, for example, in chemistry to illustrate that. There is a lot of ways in which we encode the chemistry of all of the materials around us. That can be used to train exactly as I just showed you. You can train a foundation model that becomes expert in chemistry and how every material operates, and that can actually enable you to create new materials, simulate new materials, predict properties of materials before you actually have to do them. Here's another great example. There is to create an antimicrobial. Before AI, it would take 2 years to actually develop a new potential antimicrobial, and that antimicrobial would have less than 1% chance to actually work in reality. With an AI foundation model, you can take those 2 years and do that in 48 days with 100% guarantee that it will actually work. So that is how a foundation model works. That is what AI does, and that is why it's so profound and so easy for all of us to use it, because of the breakthrough of self-learning. Now, how are companies using this? Other than, like, each of us can go and create a poem in a different language, and it's really interesting, but how do you actually use this in an economic sense, in a way to create productivity? Well, here's a couple of examples that work in many of the clients that I've worked with. Many innovation in any kind of customer support. So any interaction between clients, suppliers, employees, and a company. With AI, you can improve the satisfaction. You can improve the time that it takes to resolve a query, and you can significantly decrease the cost of operating the function. In sales functions, the administration of sales can be mostly automated with AI. Support functions, like being an employee or having to have any benefits issues or any of the functions that you have to do when you're an employee. For example, if you're going to buy a new house and you're going to ask for a mortgage, you need to ask your employer for an employer verification letter. All of those things can be done by AI agents at a higher level of satisfaction. And then, of course, coding. Google said that 2025, 25% of the code will be the code for computers, like coding computers. 25% will be AI generated. Before 2030, the estimate is over 90% of all created content in the internet, all created content of any kind, will be created by AI because it's just a better way for creators to deliver those products. Here's a couple of statistics. This is actually real data from our own function, from the function of IBM. We've been on a journey for 3 years. Our AI assistant to just be an employee of IBM is called Ask HR. And today, it actually deals with 10 million transactions. You can see that 94% of those transactions, like you have a question on your payroll, you have a question on your benefits, you want to ask for vacation, you want to get your expenses paid, you want to get an employment verification letter sent to your lender, all of those things. You want to hire somebody, you want to move somebody, you want to create a budget. 94% of all those things that before we had hundreds of people who really hated their jobs trying to do all of these transactions. Those are actually resolved by the AI with a much higher level of satisfaction. You can see that the Net Promoter Score is 75. When people were doing those transactions, it was below 50. Now, the interesting thing is that elevated the work of all of the people that were doing those transactions. So all those people are doing now more creative work. They're doing coaching. They're doing talent development. They're doing skills. They're doing learning. They're doing a lot of the things that AI is really not that good at. The humans are good because we freed the 80% of their days that they were doing transactions that really added very little value. So this was also, we work with a healthcare insurer. And the message of this slide is there is this unrealistic expectation that something like ChatGPT has created is like, okay, well, you just like implement AI and everything works the next day or the next week. No, to implement AI in companies safely in a regulated environment, it takes years to do right. and you have to train the systems, and you have to put the guardrails, and you can see the years there from the time that we implemented the system. You can see in 2020, only 1% of the queries were actually going to the system. Then it got to like 7%, then it got to 30%, 35%, 39%, now 49%. So it took many years to actually train the AI systems to be competent in those skills, to have the guardrails on those skills, to actually know when to handshake with a human, to have a human in the loop, so the AI is doing all the tedious tasks, but then actually letting the people do the judgment. It took a long time, but look at the improvements. So the improvements in the efficiency and the improvements in the satisfaction, and also shortening the time to get these claims paid. Some of these people were before like a month before their claims being treated. Now the average is 4 hours and their claim is resolved, is the outcome of it, but it's not something that you just turn it on and it gets done. It actually takes a long journey to do it safely and ethically. And that is what leads to the other side of AI. What are the risks of AI? What are the challenges of AI? And how do we mitigate them? You know, I think to start with, AI has a really, really bad PR agent. Because every movie, not every, but the majority of the movies ever created about AI are about destroying humanity. So very bad PR, a very bad reputation. So you've seen some of those, but the fact of the matter is AI does present a set of very significant challenges. And it comes from what I explained before, the nature, the different nature of an AI system versus a traditional classical computer. So I'll take a minute to dive on that. In a classical computer, you program a computer to do something, and that program is what is called deterministic. Like, if the computer makes a mistake, the computer is not making the mistake, the program is wrong, right? So the program is deterministic, it's a set of instructions, and all the computer does is executes every instruction. So with a traditional program and a computer, there is never a question as to who's at fault when the computer does something wrong. It was never a question, because the answer is, well, that means the program is wrong, right? The other aspect of it is, in most of the computers, we actually program the computers to do something, but we force users to learn the language of the computer. So users have to code. Users have to be trained on how to use the computer. AI is a different kind of system. It's not deterministic, it's probabilistic. So when you ask something to AI, what it answers is the most probable answer. But it doesn't need to be a certain answer, and it doesn't need to be pre-stored, and there is no way to track how, it's getting better now, how to track it, but most of the pure AI, the answer is generated based on probabilities. So we're going from systems that are exactly deterministic, doing what we program them to do, and we learn the language of the computer, to systems where the computer has learned our language, is speaking in our language, so we don't really need to learn. That's the easy of use. You don't really need to learn to program. You just talk to the computer, and it gives you an answer back in your language, in any language. It can even translate it. But what is coming back, it doesn't necessarily need to be true. It doesn't necessarily to be correct. All the computer is doing is based on all this trained information that we put in, is giving you the most probable answer. And it so happens that that presents a lot of problems. It presents problems because these algorithms make up things. Because on their training information, there could be bias, that then they just amplify that bias. Or it could basically be that the computer is trying honestly to create the most probable answer, but it's just inventing it. It doesn't necessarily mean that is correct. So how do you insert technology into regulated and mission-critical environments when you can't really know other than, well, probably the computer is going to be okay, right? So we came up about 5 years ago. In IBM, we felt that if we are one of the technology companies bringing this technology to society, we had an obligation to provide some safeguards on how that technology is going to be used. So we came up with these 3 basic principles of saying, we need to make sure when we use this technology called AI, we are going to use it in the places and for the uses where the nature of AI and the nature that it could be wrong and the nature that it could be making stuff up is known and is mitigated. And that is why we came up with both the principles and the pillars of what we call trustworthy AI. Principles are pretty simple. Is we should really, as a society and as a business, actually be using AI to augment humanity, not to replace humanity. AI means nothing without data. Think about it as AI is a jet engine and the data is the fuel. It's no good, that jet engine is no good if you have no fuel. So that puts emphasis in who owns the data, who has the right to own the data, use their data, and who is going to monetize that right. Our view is data and the insights derived from that data should belong to the creator of that data. And then the third one is it's really important that every one of these technologies are very transparent in articulating what was the training data used to train it, with what purpose was it trained, and what are the risks of implementing it. The pillars of trust is any AI system that you deploy in a business environment should be explainable. When it provides an answer, you should be able to know where is the source that came up with this answer. I mean, think about that. Imagine that AI becomes the best ever doctor, and it tells you, you should take these pills, and you say, why? I don't know, but just take them. That wouldn't be enough for us, would it? It wouldn't be enough, even if you think a black box is correct, that it gives you an answer for a mission-critical situation, and you can't explain where that answer comes from. Fairness, meaning it has to be equitable. If there was any bias on the training data, it needs to be de-biased, because otherwise, think about it. If you're an insurance company and you're using AI to approve loans, you could be subject to creating an adverse impact if AI was trained in what historically has been the patterns of approving loans. Those patterns may not be fair, equitable, so you need to make sure that the bias is taken into account. Robustness. Here's the interesting thing. These AI systems are fascinating. I mean, all of you that have played with one of these systems, it's just amazing what you can just go and tell it to create a poem or invent a rhyme or something. But they're also very brittle. You can fool them so easily. For example, there was a documented case where a visual system that the only mission of the system was to look at a traffic sign and detect what it was. So it looks at a stop sign and it says it's a stop sign. You would literally paint 3 dots with a pen that you couldn't even see with the eye. 3 dots in that picture, and the AI would confuse that with a yield sign. So it's very easy to hack AI with malicious prompts. So any system that you implement in an industrial setting has to actually be resilient to that hacking. It has to be robust. Transparency, I've talked about it. And then finally, privacy is one of the use of AI systems is they're extremely powerful at targeting individuals based on using data of those individuals. AI shouldn't be using data and violate privacy of that data unless the owner of that data provided consent on that. So since we came up with that 5 years ago, kind of like people look at us 5 years ago and it wasn't like really that fashionable, so everybody was okay. I remember in 2019, December of 2019, I actually wrote an article in the National Association of Corporate Directors saying board of directors really should be sensitive to the use of AI, and they have to be responsible. I think my mom and I were the two only people that ever read that article. Interesting enough, 3 months ago, 2014, it's like over 1,000 people read that article. So it took a while for the world to catch on with what the risks are of AI and what you do about that, but we're now swinging to the other side. So many of you have heard of the Federal AI Executive Order, is actually the US equivalent. There are basically over 200 bills being drafted right now in the United States to regulate some form of AI. The UA Act already passed, and it became one of the standards to refer to as to how do you regulate AI. And the main principle of the AI Act is less about regulating the technology. You see, you can use AI. Most of your phones, or half of you must have a phone, it actually has AI on it. When you're going to take a picture, the AI determines where in the picture there is a face. And the reason it does that is because it wants to color the face better, and it makes the picture look better. You know, if the AI makes a mistake on that feature, the worst that it happens is your picture is not as good. Now, that is very different than if you use an AI to determine if somebody is gonna get a bank loan. So what the EU Act does is don't regulate AI as a technology, regulate the use of that technology. So it catalogs every use of AI as high risk or low risk. For high risk use cases, AI that is going to be in direct contact with minors, AIs that can be included in education of minors, AI in banking or healthcare situations. Those that are high risk need to be regulated. Low risk cases, they don't need to be regulated. And with that, I think hopefully this was a different kind of AI conversation that you have had before. And if anything, now you know that we have a very powerful technology that is very likely going to change society. Most people ask me, Jesús, do you think that AI is going to eliminate jobs? And what I always say is I've seen about 14 studies of the future of work, and 13 of those 14 studies conclude that the net creation of jobs is a bigger number than the replacement of the jobs. So there are going to be some jobs that are going to be replaced. There are many more jobs that are going to be created. But what is certain, well, we could debate if AI is going to add or take jobs. People that use AI are going to take the jobs of the people that do not use AI. So AI is a superpower, and I hope all of us figure out how to use it for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesús. That was really awesome. Really very, very informative. My name is Bob Sheridan. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Career Education and Professional Development at the Nazarian College. And it's my honor and privilege to moderate tonight's panel. I'll refer you back to the program. We have extensive biographies in that program of all of our speakers. You have the question cards. Two of our faculty members, Puyan Islami and Amir Ghazabali, will both be looking at those questions, ranking them just by order so that we don't have the redundancies and bringing them up to the stage, so I'd encourage you there. So I'm going to start and let each of the panelists introduce themselves as they go. I'm going to start with Karina, if I might. So I guess most of the people in this room may not know about SAP, even though they use it every day, and even though they have jobs, plentiful of them. Tell us about what SAP is, what you do there, and in particular, some of the things that you're adjusting in your platforms for AI.
Great. Thank you, Bob. First, thanks for the invitation to be here with you all today. I still really appreciate in-person events, so thank you all for making time to be here with us. First, just show hands, how many people have heard of SAP? Great. I know Jesús has. SAP was actually is a startup, 52-year-old startup. It was spun out of IBM many years ago. It's a global company. It's the third largest software company based in Waldorf, Germany. We have over 100,000 employees and growing. And let's see, SAP touches about 87% of all global transactions. It's not a consumer-facing brand, but 99 of the largest 100 companies use SAP, and we have an amazing ecosystem. These are companies, and we have entire governments, actually, that trust SAP to run their most business-critical applications. And we take that responsibility very seriously. It was nice to see what IBM is doing in terms of applying AI, because we have a very similar outlook on that. And 3 guiding principles for us are that it be relevant, reliable, and responsible. And I think you can see how nicely it fits into that. Specifically for myself, I have the great pleasure of supporting faculty globally. Not I myself, I should say. I manage a team. I have a global team that supports faculty teaching SAP in the classroom. We're very grateful that CSUN is one of our amazing partners, so I know they care about their students and the future of their students. Because besides bringing in and attracting early talents into SAP, I'm also very concerned about that ecosystem. Of all the companies that actually use SAP, they also need SAP skilled talent. So I feel fortunate because I'm able to align both my professional and my personal passion of providing opportunities for students. And I know that once a student has SAP skills, puts SAP on their resume, that makes them incredibly marketable. We have some conservative estimates that our ecosystem, the SAP ecosystem, will create over 500,000 jobs over the next 3 years. And in many of these companies, early talents like yourselves are the bloodline of the companies. And so there's a lot of competition and a lot of opportunities. And so I'm excited to be here today and discuss what we're doing. Hopefully I covered all the questions.
That was great.
Great.
You know, you mentioned the ecosystem, and let's talk about that just a second. What we're really talking about here is all of the companies that use your platform, and the fact that AI is built into it now, they really have to have these AI skills in order to get the jobs in these companies all over the world. Okay, tell us a little bit about that. You're an educator at heart, I know that.
Sure, yeah, and one of the things we've done is integrate AI into all of our applications. And we have what we call, I guess, our superpower, a Joule, which is a co-pilot, which enables you to learn about any of our applications, first of all and foremost. But since we are talking about the future workforce, we'd love to talk about one of our applications, which is in the area of human resources. It's called Success Factors. One of the ways that AI has advanced our platform is that now for a manager who has an open position, you can create a job profile in 30 seconds, something that would have taken you hours in the past to do. You can quickly generate a new role profile. And not only, what excites me is not only that you could create this new job profile, but you can do it in a gender neutral way. You know, we use language, we talked, you touched upon bias. We use language that can be biased towards one gender or another. Employers can also remove any gender identifiers from an applicant, so a manager can really look at the skills of the applicant versus, anything that might speak to your gender, which is really useful. And then just lastly, would love to actually highlight a company, one of our customers, Delta Airlines. They had a really aggressive goal. They want to promote about 30% of their frontline workers to managerial roles. I should restate that. They want at least 30% of managerial roles to be filled by frontline workers, which is a really great aspiration. And we've helped them personalize the learning for their employees, so they're really unlocking the potential of their workforce by personalizing the learnings. So, I have a current role, but I have aspirations to be a manager in the future. These are the skills that I have. These are the skills that I will need. And we're able to tailor those learnings for the workforce. So that's just one of the ways that, SAP is applying AI and then helping our customers and partners also use AI to become more efficient, of course. Yeah.
Thank you, Karina. We're going to come back later and talk about what some of the skills are to actually use these platforms. Stephen, I'm going to turn to you for a minute, and I'm going to embarrass you by telling the audience that you were just recently honored as one of the top 10 influential people in all of Los Angeles. I think I read that correctly, did I? There will be many people also, particularly among our students, who may not have a good idea of what LAEDC is. They certainly know probably about the World Trade Center, but tell us a little bit about what you do at that nexus of government, business, and academia.
Sure. Thanks so much for the invitation to be here. So the LAEDC is a nonprofit organization that was created by the LA County Board of Supervisors about 43 years ago. The goal is really, back 43 years ago, it was a public-private partnership before that was really a thing. And the idea is, how do you basically make sure that you're able to grow the industries by making sure that government policies are in line, but at the same time, as we're looking at the overall economy, it's not just about businesses and government, but what about academia? What about nonprofit? What about philanthropy? What about labor? What about environmental groups and community groups? Combined together, this makes up our economy as a whole. And so what we do with LAEDC is really looking at LA as an entire huge ecosystem. How do you make sure that we continue to be competitive? And one of the best ways to make sure that we're competitive is that to make sure that we have competitive industry clusters. Yes, a lot of focus are on small businesses because 94% of all LA County companies have less than 20 employees. So a lot of folks immediately think of the mom and pop shops, the restaurants, and the dry cleaners. But a lot of them won't be able to sustain their business if you don't have major industry clusters that are here so that you can generate additional support. So you need Fortune 500 companies, you need aerospace companies, you need bioscience companies. That's what LAEDC is trying to do, to grow these ecosystems, to grow these industry clusters. So when people around the world, when they think of Los Angeles, they're not only thinking about Hollywood and entertainment. They're great industries, but did you know they're the third largest industry when it comes to job creation? Our trade and logistics sector, tourism, a number of different sectors that actually contribute a lot of jobs as well. So our KPI is to make sure that we have good jobs, we have good entrepreneurship opportunities, and good investment throughout the Los Angeles region. Lastly, what we've seen during COVID, and we knew this ahead of time, is that if the industries are growing by themselves, it's all good and all. But if you don't have a specific plan to make sure those opportunities, those job opportunities and entrepreneurship opportunities are available to our most disinvested communities, sometimes people get left behind. So LAEDC makes sure that as we're growing these industry clusters, we're working very closely with our employers to make sure there's a pathway, working with universities and education institutions like CSUN to make sure that the curriculum is aligned with what the needs are for the industry, but at the same time, making sure that industry is also responsible to supporting the growth of our local economy.
And I know the Dean mentioned it, I want to mention it too. You serve on our advisory board, and you really, really are a very valuable contributor, and thank you for that. I know in prep for this, you and I spoke, and you were going to query some of the industries around Southern California that are major employers, and to kind of ask them what they're thinking. What are you doing with AI? What aren't you doing with it? What did you learn?
Well, a couple things. We actually just earlier this week had our economic briefing. We have a quarterly economic briefing where our economists look at information, and I work with our team to specifically look at certain sectors. Most people don't know this, but Los Angeles is one of the largest manufacturing centers in the entire United States. However, across the nation, what we've seen is that manufacturing jobs are decreasing. Partially is because of the transition of what we manufacture. A lot of the shirts and shoes are manufactured over in China and Asia. So what's left here are actually more of high-value products, right? So in Los Angeles region, we have aerospace component parts, we have medical devices. But as we're moving forward, because of the increase in labor costs, some folks are now moving towards automation. Industry 4.0 and AI is coming in as well. So when they're investing in making sure that they're able to compete more effectively, they're actually investing in more technology, which means that there are going to be less manual jobs that are going to be available, but those jobs that are available are dependent on folks that are actually able to help them with automation. So what we're seeing is that there's a huge transition. Specifically speaking, when it comes to the numbers, we saw that last year to this year in LA County alone, we lost 8,000 manufacturing jobs. However, when it comes to productivity, that productivity remained the same. So you're seeing that automation, the machines, able to, unfortunately at the beginning, replace some of those manual jobs. But what we're seeing also is that now, as they're increasing production, they're gonna need more and more folks that understand how to basically put those systems together so that they can continue to be even more efficient. So that's one aspect. Another aspect as we're looking around is that Los Angeles, we're getting a lot of infrastructure dollars from the federal government. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 years. However, right now,
no one does.
Well, we can predict that we're not going to get as much as we have in the last few years with IRA and IIJA compared to what we had before, right? Looking at some of the historic patterns. But with that said, as we're looking at infrastructure development, whether it's energy transition, whether it's transportation, AI is now playing a significant role in terms of making sure that the data is available. As Jesús was talking about the geospatial information that's going to be mapped, this is going to help us plan what kind of transportation projects we're going to do. How do you synchronize the street lights? How do you basically invest in that infrastructure? So all of that is becoming new opportunities for new jobs that are going to be available in the management of these public infrastructure for the next decade. So a lot of great opportunities, but a lot of great challenges.
Really interesting. Cameron, when I first talked with you about coming on the panel and you explained what Weights and Biases does, I immediately was reminded of the chemical company BASF. Many years ago, they had a tagline that said, "We don't make the things you buy, we make the things you buy better." And that's what you're doing for AI developers. Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, so I am the CFO of a company called Weights and Biases. I've been there for 3 years, so well before ChatGPT sort of became famous and popular. And what we do is we help AI developers, machine learning engineers test and evaluate and keep track of the different models that they're working on before it goes out to production. So to give a brief example, self-driving cars, there's different software that's used to tell the sky versus the road versus a pedestrian at dusk, at dawn, all times of day. And so our tools allow the engineers who are working on that to compare different versions, get feedback from their teams before it's pushed out to production. So that's one example. Our company has OpenAI, NVIDIA, Apple, Meta. The biggest companies in the world are our customers, and so we're the tooling behind that.
And give us your thoughts about what's coming. I was curious. Jesús knows that when I was briefing Utpal, when we thought he was going to be here, I asked him to give us some use cases. And he said to me, well, I'm going to put a filter on it. I'm only going to give you ones that are selling, not ones that people are talking about. What's really happening? Tell us what's really coming and where the jobs are going to be.
Yeah, so I mean, we're kind of at the front row of this. I mean, we work with all of these large companies, and the pace of change is happening so quickly. And it's one of those things where industries are getting completely shaken up because of AI and the automation and the transition. And so in terms of jobs, it's a little bit hard to predict, right? Because things are going to change and shift. When I think about AI generally and the question of will AI take jobs, right? I think there have been studies that have shown that AI is actually the great equalizer, right? So people who don't have certain skills, or if you don't have a law degree, you can now, paralegals can now operate at the level of a lawyer and level up to the superpower of ChatGPT, because you have access to all of the case law in the world now, right? So this question of, you have low-skilled workers, and a lot of low-skilled workers are going to be out of jobs. That may be the case in certain scenarios, but maybe not for all scenarios. And so I think what we're seeing is that the skills that are required to succeed going forward it actually becomes more about softer skills and behavioral skills. So ability to learn and ability to adapt to change when you don't know what's going to happen a year from now, 5 years from now, much less 6 months from now. And so we test, certainly at Weights and Biases, when we're interviewing candidates, it's around, we have 4 core values: honesty, gumption, grit, and curiosity. And it's really around that curiosity piece. Like, how can you learn and work together with AI? Because as Jesús mentioned, humans that can work with AI, those are the ones that will maintain the jobs going forward. And so that's kind of what we look for, is that ability to continually learn. And the second thing is, we haven't maybe talked about this quite yet, but you might start hearing about agentic AI and what that is. And think of this, I'll go back to maybe self-driving car analogy. Self-driving cars, there's different levels of autonomy there, right? And how much human interaction is required. Agentic AI is similar to that, where LLMs can take over parts of workflow processes, and the question is, how much do you let the LLM take over that before there's human intervention? And so what becomes more important over time is how can you as a worker check the work of the LLM? How can you check the work of the AI agent? And so that requires sort of different skills to be able to come in and evaluate that. And so some of the programs here that we were talking about, the micro-credentialing, the ability to continually learn and take these certifications, that becomes more and more important, I think, to be able to evaluate the work of some of these AI machine models.
You're skeptical that agents are not quite ready yet. You've told.
Not quite ready yet. I mean, I think there's, as Jesús and others have mentioned, there's certain aspects of AI agents that are easier to deploy or are happening now. And so I think the use case for ChatGPT when it was first released is personal productivity. Your own, you can use it to write emails, you can use it to help you review papers, or certain specific workflows in HR or in finance. I think as the technology develops, and we're in the very early innings of this, you're going to see more and more where the agents can help do cross-functional workflows across HR, across finance, to improve productivity and collaboration cross-functionally. So again, we're very early. I don't think we're by far, we've seen the full range of capabilities, and so there's still a lot more to come.
Great. Jesús, Utpal gave me 3 or 4 use cases for you to talk about. You've talked about all of them already. I'm going to switch gears. And I wrote to you, and we had an exchange of emails very early this morning, and I said, let's not bury the lead. You are, aside from a global figure in commerce, you are one of the most passionate advocates for the advancement of Hispanic populations around the world that I know. It's at your core. You're very active in professional development. You know that we're I believe, the second largest Hispanic institution in the country. Tell us about that passion. Tell us what's going to be necessary to make sure that these technologies are accessible to people of colors. And Chandra mentioned in his speech earlier this divergence of the demographic vectors of the global north and the global south. There's a real problem here. And our students are really going to be competing, not just in Southern California, but with the world. Tell us about your passions.
Yeah, I'll take that into portions. Well, so first, my passion for Hispanic advocacy is as much a personal journey experience as it is a economic growth opportunity. I think one of the most positive superpowers the United States have is the Hispanic demographics. Hispanics in the US generate $3.6 trillion of the GDP. If Hispanics in the US would be a country, they would have just surpassed the United Kingdom, and it would be the 5th country in the world, second fastest growing economy at scale, only behind China, just surpassed India. And it will be over $5 trillion by the end of the decade. So no other developed country has any portion of the demographics that is creating 1 million 18 years old for the next 2 decades. So it is the future of the workforce, it is the future of the consumption of the economy. And just to give you statistics, I could be here forever, 70% of the new mortgages in the next 10 years will be Hispanic in this country, 70%. So it creates an incredible economic opportunity for the country. It creates an economic growth. It creates a fantastic opportunity if we seize it. Like every opportunity, they're never given, they have to be taken. So my advocacy of the Hispanic opportunity is as much about, if that is the demographics of this country, if that is gonna be the second largest growth market, why wouldn't you be trying to benefit from that? Is my advocacy to companies. That's why consumer companies are trying to figure out how to understand the consumers in the US because of the economic opportunity of that. The personal opportunity comes from my own journey. So I was born and raised in Spain, and in the Spain I was born, I mean, I looked like everybody else, and I spoke like everybody else, and I didn't know, I didn't have a concept of what diversity means, because I was like everybody else. I was the majority. And when I came to this country, almost like literally 30 years to the date, like I think of 3 days, I landed in Irvine, California on October of 1994. And I had done pretty well in Spain. I was very early, and I was like doing very well. And I landed in this country, and I then started to appreciate what is being seen different. Like 30 years ago, I didn't speak very good English, so that was already a handicap. I didn't look like the definition of a successful professional. I didn't look Mexican either, so everybody was trying to figure me out as like, okay, you kind of sound Mexican, but you're not Mexican, like, what are you? And literally within a month of being in this country, I was sat down by somebody very well-intended, and I was told that I had made a horrible mistake, that I would never succeed in this country, especially in professional services. I couldn't communicate well. I didn't really have what it takes, so the best thing I could do was to go back and take my family and kind of like save my family all the drama. And when you go through that, and I wasn't really understanding, right? Like then you realize that your image of yourself and the image of yourself in somebody else's could have a huge gap. And that image is formed based on perception and biases on what people think. I mean, like I said, all of this was very well intended. So you kind of have a choice at that point. Do you kind of look at your shoes and say, well, they're right, I'm gonna go? Or you dedicate your journey to prove them wrong? And I took door B, clearly, right? So I mean, I went from being considered that I would never succeed in my profession to actually lead a $10 billion unit that is one of the largest consulting companies in the world. And interesting, I mean, one of the advices that I got at that time was like, hey, maybe you should change your name, because the name Jesus makes people uncomfortable. It's like, well, I
think you've done pretty well.
And I didn't have to change my name.
Yeah.
So I had that experience, which then, for me, was really important to understand, wow, we have a fantastic economic opportunity, but we have certain traits, our culture, our heritage, that are positive or negative, but we need to get more people to understand that whatever you think of yourself and whatever somebody else thinks of yourself, those, like if you want twins, sometimes are like far cousins, right? They're very far from each other, and we need to help people just be authentic and be themselves and not let the
But
context
Jesus,
define
you
what they
do
are.
more than talk it. I know you through Angeli's investors.
Yeah.
You're investing in companies. You're putting your money where your mouth is.
It's such a
Take a minute on
no-brainer.
that.
Yeah, it's such a no-brainer. Like, if you guys didn't get anything about the AI, like, take notes on this one. Latinas are, like, in the 99th percentile, the most successful entrepreneurs in this country. Like, top 5, they create the majority of the businesses, they perform better. So it's like such a no-brainer to invest on successful Latinos, and specifically on Latinas. I am the product of 2 things. I'm the product of a good education system in Spain, and my mom, who was the hardest working entrepreneur, and she basically gave me those values. So I would always put my money where my mouth is, and if you get nothing else, if you see a hardworking Latina create a business, invest on her, because you're gonna make money.
Karina, we're going to give you a chance to talk about this later. I want to try one more thing with Jesús while we have him. A third hat that you wear. You spend a lot of time in corporate boardrooms.
Yes.
And by the way, I read your article.
Thank you.
I did.
Thank you. And that was my mom, you and I.
Don't give me any credit. It was assigned to me, so I read it. But in these corporate boardrooms, when the doors closed, what are they saying about AI? What's at the level of governance that then really determines what these corporations are going to do in terms of their strategic direction? What are they saying behind that closed door?
Yeah, I mean, for the last year, it has been a frenzy. It has been everybody having FOMO, like fear of missing out, like everybody running around to learn, everybody trying to figure out what to do. And I think there has been a lot of academic education, but a lack of pragmatism, because the board of directors don't really run the companies. They're supposed to basically provide the governance and be the custodians of the long-term value and reputation of this company. So it has been hard for the majority of board members that already cybersecurity was hard enough. And now, like, this AI is like, okay, what is this? Is this like a... So there has been a lot of, like, thrashing, and now it's getting a little bit more stable. I think now board of directors understand, okay, the opportunity is real and the risks are real. I'll give you a couple of examples that they're public, that's why I can give them. So there is a very well-known airline in our neighboring country up north that thought it was a really good idea, as I mentioned, to put AI in customer service. But clearly they didn't think it was a good idea to put very good guardrails, and they kind of thought that this idea of hallucinations is like, that has to be exaggerated, like that's not. So this AI bot, in one of the chat conversations with one of the airline customers, the airline customer says like, hey, I really need a refund for this, and the AI chatbot just made up a new refund policy and committed to the clients like, oh yeah, of course, we're gonna give you all your money back. And then they say like, no, I mean, it was wrong, it just made that up. And the actual customer took this airline to court, and the court said, yeah, you actually have to give them the money. It's like, but it wasn't us, it was our AI. It's like, so you're not responsible for your AI? What do you think? So this idea of being, who has algorithmic accountability? When you use AI, who has accountability? It becomes very important, and therefore you have to treat that as you treat cybersecurity. So item number 1 for boardrooms is you have to make a list. You need to understand where is AI being used everywhere. If you don't have that list, no other question is worth it. But once you have that list, you can ask the questions like, what is it being used for? Do we have the rights to the data that it was trained on? Is there any liability or infringement of IP that somebody 3 years from now can get us on? Is there bias? Can it create adverse impact? Is that like all of these questions to govern the use of AI starts when making a list. So my number 1 recommendation to every board, everywhere I go, I just did it like 2 days ago. I said, okay, just a Monday morning, go to the boardroom and say, give me the list of every place where AI is being used. 97% of companies cannot produce that list today.
Wow.
That's the issue.
Let me
So guys, if you actually talked with an AI, just try to make up a policy and convince the AI. Actually, I kid you not, the other case is actually well documented. The AI started cursing to the client because, and then it started saying, like, the person was pretty smart, obviously, said, like, don't you think, like, this company is horrible? And the AI said, yeah, this company is really horrible. You know, the customer service sucks. I wouldn't buy here. That was the AI, actually, the customer support of the company. So, yeah, there's a lot of case studies now of AI going rogue.
So let me steer us for a minute back to the workforce of the future portion of our discussion instead of AI, okay? And I want to, Stephen, you're going to have to be an observer of this one for a minute, but Cameron, Karina, Jesús, the three of you work at extraordinarily sophisticated technological companies. And I would ask you to answer this question in two ways. What do you hire for skills in your firm, and what do the users of your product hire to use your products in their hiring? And Cameron, you're a little complex because, as we talked about, you know, you're providing to a middleman effectively. Your customers, think through to the end customers of them. All right. So what are you hiring? What are the skills you hire for? What are the users of your product? Cameron, why don't you take that one first?
Sure. So I think it's actually similar to what I was mentioning before, where it's around some of the softer skills and the ability to use AI going forward. So the people that are learning how to use and manage the AI tools, the LLMs. I mean, certainly in my company, very specifically, as you mentioned, we look for very technical people who understand and spend a lot of time understanding the competitive landscape, what every large language model out there and foundation model builder is doing, so that our tools can better adapt to that. So there's a lot of very technical, specific knowledge that we're hiring for. But outside of that, it's still the very general, you know, how can someone learn? How can someone adapt? How can they be thought partners as we go through the evolution of embedding AI in our organization? You know, I think, Jesus, in terms of what you were talking about, in terms of listing out as a company, all of the different use cases for AI, it becomes incredibly important going forward for the workforce of the future companies to be able to fully embed AI into their work streams. And so that requires different skills, certainly for managers as well, not just for any employee, where, you know, I think if you go back to the tech boom in 2000, in the early 2000s, right, everyone had an e-commerce site up. Everyone had this layer and saying, well, we're not brick and mortar, we now have e-commerce and we're online. And they would throw up a website and actually nothing changed internally. And so, you know, Barnes and Nobles or booksellers, or, you know, they didn't actually very well succeed in that transition to being truly an e-commerce D2C company. And I think you can kind of probably see the same thing happening with AI today. Every single company has an AI strategy. Every single company is adopting it. But the real question is, how is that actually translating into day-to-day workflows? And are managers able to incentivize their teams to learn differently, to execute workflows differently? And so that's sort of what we're looking for, is that ability to adapt and change and to bring those processes into day-to-day work.
Before I leave you, I want to make a note to the audience. On the screen and in your programs, you have those QR codes which run to the LinkedIn profiles. And I'd encourage you to both check out all of our panelists and to connect with them. But I'm going to give you a personal plug, because your LinkedIn profile is really, really awesome. The posts that you put up about cultural issues in companies, you're really a great person to follow. You all are great people to follow. But I've really been impressed, and I've told you that before. Karina, how about you? What do you hire for at SAP, and what do you, in that?
Yeah, Jesús, accept my invitation. I sent it a week ago. No.
And then in the ecosystem, where the folks that are in this audience that are taking SAP or SAP certificates, when they go out and they get a job, what are they going to be doing?
Sure. Thanks. First, I just, of course, want to build on what Cameron mentioned. I'm an engineer, and I've been surprised because these soft skills are becoming increasingly more important. And I can be honest and didn't always appreciate that piece of the work. I think SAP and our customers and partners are looking for very similar profiles. Depending on the role, of course. If it's a technical role, of course, having knowledge of SAP solutions, including certification, is really advantageous for people that are looking to grow their careers. So absolutely, and like I said, depending on the skill, you may require some coding, some hard technical skills, but increasingly, we are always looking for a growth mindset. I say you got to learn to learn, learn to learn, because you're going to be learning. We're just really at the tip of the iceberg here in terms of generative AI, and I'm also a huge advocate of, don't worry about AI taking your job. You need to worry about somebody who knows AI taking your job. As much as knowledge, fundamental knowledge that you can have around that, we're looking for folks who are collaborative, right? Who want to work with other people. But that's a huge one. Increasingly, people who are empathetic and that can work with a diverse population. I agree with Jesús, the value of having a diverse workforce. I'm glad, I've been in the workforce for a very long time. I feel like I started at a place where differences were tolerated to a place where differences are now celebrated, and it's really nice. Companies that have a good culture recognize, and also not just the companies, but there's a lot of data from great journals like the Harvard Business Review, who have consistently shown that diverse teams deliver better solutions, more creative, more profitable. And so a lot of companies do embrace that. But it's not just diversity for diversity's sake, so we want to make sure that you are inclusive. Stay curious. Like, I love that, and I had that about coming in and staying curious, wanting to learn, wanting to build. How can, AI make you more efficient?
I had a friend once who said to me that the cure for boredom is curiosity, and there is no cure for curiosity. It's a progressive disease.
Yes.
Right.
I am a huge advocate of that. Always learning, like I said, and skilling. And so one of the things, a lot of companies are moving towards a skill-based, not so much degree. Of course, a degree, and I'm a big advocate. I have many degrees, so don't want to put that down. But the augmentation of certifications. We have so many additional platforms that you can learn from. Right? So many free resources. I see, I have a daughter in high school, and I see the way that she learns and augments, her professors' lectures. There's just so much out there that you are able to take the initiative to learn, and that's one of the things that we look for. Curiosity, adaptability, things are changing constantly. Every tech company is going through a huge transformation. And so we need folks that, know about cloud architecture, and if you don't, that you want to learn about it. So,
Karina, I'm supposed to ask questions here and not make comments, but I'm going to offer one viewpoint. You mentioned, and we talked about it also, Cameron, that there's a big movement, a well-financed movement, to move away towards skills-based hiring and away from the four-year degree, right? You've got very, very well-financed campaigns to really disparage the value of the four-year campaign. In some instances for corporate purposes to really drive down the costs. In some ways, you're looking at the displacement of the H-1B visas, and instead of that, they're looking to go through skill mills, and they give certificates, and they get a first job that pays $65,000, $75,000 a year, but 3 years later, those skills are obsolete, and who's retraining, okay? That was the purpose of professional education beyond a degree, which Dean Subramaniam mentioned earlier. It was that we would provide you through these certificates skills that would make you job ready on day one, but we would also give you the highly disciplined four-year degree so that you weren't just ready for job ready for day one, but you could fall back on it for your life and your career. And
I agree. Job mobility is where degrees, I think, come in. And I will say also, I think that movement has been well-financed. And the truth is, even for the most part, when you remove degree requirements, over 90% of the people hired have degrees. So there is still a very much of a degree bias.
Showed that, actually.
Yeah. So I say, an education is a privilege. And if you are able to get a degree, of course, that's number one. But there's a lot of people who just can't. They're trying to feed their families, and they don't have 4 years. And I love the fact that, you can get a certification and get working and, start making a living wage.
I get it.
Yeah.
Stephen, before we get to the question for you, I want to make one other comment. Jesús, you made a very interesting point in your presentation that AI has learned our language. We don't have to learn theirs, as we did with coding. And that has an implication for what all of you said about skills, because critical thinking, persuasion, precise communication, adaptability, for those of you sitting in this room, that's what our learning objectives are in our curriculum, right? So the very fact that you have systems that know your language means that the technical skills that you need, no doubt they're there, but it is those soft skills that we actually instill in courses where critical thinking and communication are key. So I think that's just something to observe. Stephen, back to you, the last question actually, and we'll take some questions from the audience. The Olympics are coming. You were in Paris. You're talking with all of the people that are doing this. What on earth is the Olympics going to look like with AI?
Before we get to what Olympics for 2028 is going to look like with AI, let's step back a little bit. We learned quite a lot from our partners around the world so that we can get ready for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2028. And one of the lessons we learned is from London. In 2012, unlike us, we don't have to build any infrastructure. They actually have to build their stadium. And what they did is they took a part of London, East London, and they transformed it, and they built these state-of-the-art facility. I think they spent altogether like billions and billions of dollars. And one of the specific stadiums that they built was a state-of-the-art media center, so that the international broadcasters can basically utilize the state-of-the-art communication devices, and they can basically broadcast all over the world. About 3 months before 2012 Olympic Games started, a little device called the iPad was introduced. When they opened during the Olympic Games, nobody used that station because they were able to basically work remotely with the iPad and communicate directly with headquarters. So millions of dollars were wasted. The reason why I give you that story is because it's a great lesson learned. You're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, getting ready for something, and technology is transforming so quickly that you can be obsolete in 2 seconds. That's a long way of saying we don't know what AI is going to do in the next few years. What we do know right now is as we're moving forward already, if you guys been to the new Intuit Dome, they're now using facial recognition technology. You're paying with your face, you're not paying with your phone. Right? But this is a shock to a lot of folks. Before, just a couple of years ago, paying with your phone, people are not very comfortable. They still want to pay with your credit card or cash, right? So these things are moving even more exponentially, faster and faster. So by the time we get there, we're already talking about transportation. But as we're talking about making sure that we have public transportation to make sure the trains are connected, Joby and other aerial solution companies are coming in with flying taxis. Okay.
Sign me up.
Sensor technology, we're talking about Waymo. I mean, these are the things that are already happening now. And so in 4 years, right, it's all going to be completely transformed.
Maybe I'm going at something different here because it seems to me that the organizers of the Olympics, their vendors, entrepreneurial companies are going to pop up. We're talking 3.5 years from now. What's the workforce going to look like? Are they ready? I've been talking around campus about I'd like to form an initiative here that might follow up on what we did with JP Morgan Chase Foundation and the boot camps, where we would create here at CSUN, where they're not using in our venues, an AI workforce of the Olympics. And maybe not just with our students, but with the community. Am I onto something or am I crazy?
You are, and I think this is a beyond. So one of the things that we've been saying with LAEDC is stop looking at 2028 like LA 28 is going to solve everything. A lot of folks were expecting, it's like, oh my God, LA 28 is in 3.5 years. Why haven't they solved world hunger? Well, it's not their job. Their job is to put on the game, right? And yesterday I was in another event, and that was the message going through, right? Ask not what LA28 is going to do for you. Ask what you're going to be doing for 2028. We need to contribute. So I actually love the idea. So one is beyond 2028, because the way that we're looking at it, 2028 is just going to be 1 month, 2 weeks of Olympic and 2 weeks of Paralympic Games. Don't forget, we're going to be hosting the FIFA World Cup in 2026, Super Bowl in 2027, NBA All-Star Game in 2026, US Open Championship in 2031 and 2033 for women and men for golf. We're candidate city for World Rugby Championship in 2031 and 2033 for women, and then 2039 we're going to be hosting the US Open. That's just things that are just happening.
And IBM is going to be doing the user, the customer or the spectator for all of it, right?
Okay, with all that's going to be coming, it's going to be all connected. These are the possibility that's there. So from a workforce perspective, this is what we can actually do. Stop waiting in terms of seeing what's going to happen. Actually, understanding what the needs are, that's great. Form a group here. Make sure that you're actually able to develop technology and develop solutions. This is actually going to be very valuable, because I think the world will be looking in Los Angeles as an innovation center for these new types of solutions that will be coming up. And by the way, just a couple other quick things. The way that we're looking at the legacy, unlike London, where it's going to be a physical space for the stadium, we don't have to build any more stadiums. The legacy is going to be technology and sustainability. What app is going to control? What one app is going to rule them all? You know, what one app is going to bind them all, right? Lord of the Rings? No one got that? Anyway, but the thing is, a cybersecurity component, data security component, right? That's going to basically be developed and tested right here. That's going to be big money. So those are the things that we're going to leave behind as a legacy, and I think CSUN can actually take a leadership position in making sure that this population and this future talent pool is actually driving what people are going to be looking at.
Terrific. From our audience. From our audience, if AI is evolving toward general intelligence, how can people be competitive in the workplace given that machines will be much more flexible, efficient, and reliable? How will unskilled workers transition? General AI, that's talking about something a little different. Anybody, that one?
Well, I think we touched upon that yeah, you have this amazing tool. You know, look at AI as your superpower and learn how to use it and leverage it to work more efficiently. So I think that's where that's going. Personally, I think we're a little not that close to general AI. You know, we have really great applications for specific applications.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that should be the one thing you worry about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as mentioned earlier, there's the human intervention or the human involvement in monitoring the AI becomes more important. And so I mean, there's the word co-pilot, you hear that everywhere, because that's truly kind of the relationship between human and AI. And I think that, you know, certainly the pace of development has been tremendous over the past however many, a couple of years. Maybe the pace is slowing down, I don't know, but ultimately, you know, as I mentioned before, I think it's a great equalizer for low-skilled talent because you can bring up your skills, and there's been multiple studies on that. I think there's more of actually a question on high-skilled labor, because AI is so effective that people can fall asleep at the wheel because it does such a great job. But then what matters even more is then the ability to then wake up if there is an edge case or if something hallucinates. Then you can have major problems. And we just don't have enough history to know how to interact with AI in that way. But I think as AI continues to evolve towards more general intelligence, that is going to become more important. And so, you know, we don't know the answer to that quite yet.
Jesús, you know, before we walk away from general AI, you know, your colleague Gavin Jones walked this stage 5 years ago and talked about how quantum was on the distant horizon. It's here, or awfully close. Is that going to change the pace to get to general AI?
No, I mean, yeah, so quantum advantage is within 3 years now, but it's a different kind of computing power for a different kind of problems. I think on general AI, I mean, general AI has a lot more problems than people think, but let's just put for a second, let's just assume that you have a general AI, like hyper-intelligent thing. And you can chat with it, and it knows everything about everything. Can general AI make your bed in the morning? Is general AI gonna cook your breakfast? Is general AI gonna like teach your children? You know, there is a lot of friction in society. Even if you make the leap, which is a lot of hype. I mean, somebody very well known the other day like said, oh, you know, general AI is gonna like cure cancer next year. And I said, how? I said, oh, because we're gonna be able to simulate like all of the cancers and all of the drugs. And I said, no, we can't. Like mathematically, you actually can't. Like if you really spend about a minute to do the equation, then you figure out that that's not gonna happen anywhere in the next 5 years. Because biology is like trillions of years complicated of evolution. So even for that general intelligence, that's not gonna happen. So, okay, so it's not gonna cure cancer, it's not gonna make the bed, like maybe at best it's gonna drive you around, but there is a lot of other things that still general AI wouldn't be able to do. What it would be able to do is to eliminate a lot of like lower level tasks and elevate all of us to do a lot of things. I mean, remember the life expectancy in this country, what, like 100 years ago, it was what, like 50 years old? And now it's like 70, 80. And we used to, like the majority of the population used to have a job, which is to actually do horseshoes. And now it's like, okay, well, those jobs are not there, but is society worse because we all can like now fly in planes and go places? Not really. So I think general AI will create so many other possibilities, which will create so many other jobs, which will be able to improve things. But we are, traditionally, we're very bad at extrapolating those secondary and tertiary impacts of technology. For example, like the day that the Wright brothers made a plane fly, nobody was thinking that the world would need cabin attendants. Everybody was like, okay, well, this thing can fly. But then there is going to be like, or, you know, nobody was thinking that, well, in airports, we're going to have like lounges with like nice food. Like all of those things that get created of progress, we're very bad at estimating. And then to on the point of quantum will be able to help with things like advanced material discovery. We still have a pretty big problem with batteries. You know, we need batteries that are like 10 times more capacity, 10 times less cost, 10 times less weight. And that is a fundamental chemical problem of the lithium-ion batteries that computers like quantum computers can actually simulate to a level that traditional computers can. So that kind of computing power, yeah, it will make AI better, it will create better stability in financial systems, it can actually solve very complicated logistic problems, it will help with advanced materials, but is not necessarily going to lead to general intelligence, in my view.
The other question is why does AI use so much energy when humans don't use as much? How are we going to cope with this? There were two things that really struck me in the general press recently. The Washington Post did an article that said, exhaustive description of this, that to send a 100-word email requires a 12-ounce bottle of water to cool the system. Every 100-word email. That blew me away. And then we had Microsoft about to reopen 3 Mile Island. Is this sustainable?
I mean, it's a big, I'll start with that one. It's not sustainable on a linear curve. And I actually did the math because I knew you were going to ask me on this, so I wrote it down. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is we're very, very early on this next arc of generative AI and these machines. So right now, we are brute forcing a lot of the things that we do, as I mentioned. So some of these LLMs have like 100 billion, 200 billion, 300 billion parameters. Parameters is the size of this thing. And imagine you have to do all this, like trillions of self-learning for each one of those parameters, which is why it takes all of that. Interesting thing is what we are learning is we're learning that we are not anywhere close the limits of scalability up or down on this new model of AI. Meaning, we have proven that you can take, like language, for example, English language or translation, that use case, that works very well on a 300 billion parameter language model, and you can actually do it equal or better performance with an 8 billion parameter. And now we're taking it to like a 1 billion parameter, and it literally performs within 1%, equally as well for specific use cases. Well, you just took 97% of the power that it took you to do a query on this large model. So for 3% of the power, you can have exactly the same outcome if you engineer AI to be more purpose specific. So there's going to be a lot that is going to happen through engineering, because you couldn't do that. You need to do that in order to put AI in these devices, right? You couldn't have, like, imagine if you need like a bottle of water to be cooling your phone just because you have a query on ChatGPT. It wouldn't work. So that's going to help on that. But still, I think there's going to be a fundamental infrastructure crunch on data centers, specifically for training, right? So in AI, you have training time and you have inference time. Inference is when you're asking the question and it's telling you the answer. Training it takes, like in some of these models, months. And it takes as much of like an entire city power to actually do that. I think that is going to require new models. There is a branch of AI called neuromorphic computing, which is computing that is trying to emulate a lot more how our brain works, which is how I started on this, which is why I said, I mean, think about that. A human brain has 100 billion neurons on average, so each of us, which if you figure out how many connections, let's say is hundreds of trillions. So the fascinating thing is I just said that, like some of these big models, like the latest models of Llama 3.1 or ChatGPT, you have like 400 billion parameters. So we're within a factor of like tens to have the same number of parameters in this model as connections there are in a human brain. That's kind of fascinating. But here's the difference. A human brain is roughly a 12-watt machine. So if you extrapolate that, it would take 1 billion people, so 1 billion brains, would consume the same thing as GPT-3 for one day. So the efficiency that evolution has created in like biological brains is basically 1,000 billionths factor on what we have today. That's the range that we can actually bring it down, because we know that it works for our brain. So we have basically 1 to the power of 9 that we could, in theory, reduce the power for these systems. And that's why I think we've said many times, we're very beginning, we're very early in this AI curve. There is going to be a lot of innovation that is going to come in shrinking the models, in creating AI-specific models, reducing the power. But meanwhile, in order to bridge that, we're still going to consume an insane amount of power to train these systems. So.
To the audience, I will tell you, we have a lot of questions here, and as you can see with this field, none of the answers to any of these questions are simple, so we're not going to get to as many of these as we want, but I'm going to toss this one to you, Cameron, since you played the violin. We are here in the beautiful Soraya. In what ways can AI tools prepare music students for an evolving workforce where creative, analytical, and technology skills intersect? How can the creative departments here leverage AI to foster interdisciplinary collaboration? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think with AI, I mean, it certainly is reducing the cost of a lot of things, maybe not power, but it's reducing the cost of creativity. It's reducing the cost of collaboration. It's reducing a lot of the stuff that, like the high friction stuff. So I mean, I fully realize the question is focused on creativity. Just as an example from management, a lot of the friction and a lot of time that makes people unhappy is cross-functional collaboration and taking meeting notes and just having to figure out, after you've been in a meeting, how do you disperse that information to other people? And so AI can help make all of that stuff that isn't fun and inefficient just faster. You have automatic note takers. You have all of these things that can that reduce the cost of collaboration, for example. So when you apply that to creative functions, and we see that with the development of AI-generated music, video, content, and so it can be a powerful tool, just as it is in any other discipline, to be able to increase the pace of content generation or music and open up ideas in ways that, as a human, it would take many months or years maybe of collaboration or working on just to facilitate and increase the pace of that cycle, creative cycle.
Last question. Karina, anybody, but let's start with Karina. Let's be honest, students are already using AI tools like Chat, GPT, often to do the thinking for them. What advice would you give CSUN to teach them how to use AI responsibly, fixing flaws like I'm having a hard time reading that part. You get the gist.
Yeah, absolutely. So one is to know that it's actually using ChatGPT to do assignments. Like I'm not in the classroom, and I have a lot of sympathy for faculty right now who are having to deal with the pervasive use of ChatGPT, even when they're not planning to use it. So I would say to embrace the tool and then give students assignments where they are having to use their critical thinking skills. So yes, use ChatGPT to create, an essay or a report, and then let's talk about where ChatGPT went wrong, because it will go wrong for the most part. And and talk about that, because this is, again, what we're looking for, what employers are going to be looking, is that critical thinking skill. A lot of times, the AI is looking like a black box. You're asking the questions, you're getting this answer, and it's up to us to figure out if this answer is, relevant, reliable, and responsible, right? What kind of biases is it spitting out? And so, like I said, there's not one easy answer, but I would definitely say the students are going to use the tool, as that question just states. So assume that your students are using ChatGPT, and then take it from there.
Let me end with one very quick question that's almost like a speed dating thing, okay? Quick question, one sentence or two. Start with you, Cameron. One piece of advice for CSUN before you leave us tonight.
Try and test out all of the AI tools you can possibly get your hands on, and that will be so valuable for you going forward.
Stephen?
Jumping on that, we know folks that use and depend on ChatGPT, because when you ask them, give me more thoughts about it, they don't know anything about it. If you're in school, you're trying to learn, but if you're using ChatGPT to basically deliver everything, you're not learning anything. Eventually, when you're working with the employers, we're going to ask you the tough question, and ChatGPT won't be able to answer that for you when you're face-to-face. So use it as a tool, don't rely on it.
Yeah.
Karina?
Continue on that. Use it or lose it. You really need to practice those critical thinking skills. Stay curious. Absolutely stay curious, and continue to learn how to learn. Just embrace AI and figure out how it can make your life easier in whatever area that is.
Jesús, you get the last word.
Yeah, I would say be more like the Renaissance. And what that means, if you're focused on technology and science, actually learn liberal arts. If you're focused on liberal arts, then actually learn to code. I think the most successful people in the future are the people that can use the right brain and the left brain combined, and that means bring art and technology, creativity and discipline, both at the same time, because that's what AI is not going to be great at, and that is where, let AI do the artificial stuff and then invest in human intelligence to be more human.
Thank all of you so much.
Wow, that was impressive. Thank you all so much, by the way, in terms of such a wonderful discussion on how AI is changing the world that we live in. I love the idea that many of you actually expanded on some of those things in terms of lifelong learning, in terms of our learning never ends. So thank you for that. I wanted to thank Jesús Mantas, Cameron Kinloch, Karina Montilla, Edmonds, and Stephen Cheung, and Bob Sheridan, of course, being a moderator. Thank you for such a great discussion. It was time well utilized. I also wanted to thank the following individuals, actually, by the way, instrumental in putting this event together. Otherwise, we won't have this event, by the way. Carla Mendoza, Ken Rappy, I'm not sure where they are, Pam Russell, and Andrea Balian. Thank you, wherever you are. They're always running around to manage these events. Now, at the end, by the way, I also want to thank all the students, faculty, staff, and alumni, and the community members who are here today. So thank you for coming and attending this event. Have a wonderful time. Thank you all for attending.